Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those who are new here, my name is Samantha and I'm a casual YouTuber who loves making EUC and mental health content on the side. I'm also a psychiatrist who lives and works in Christchurch, New Zealand. After several weeks of poor weather, I'm glad to inform you that the sun is shining once again and I'm out looking for a good place to film. Today, I'm going to show you another perspective of Christchurch looking out to the sea. And since I'm on the east coast of the South Island, we'll be looking out to the South Pacific Ocean to be more specific. To do that, I need to travel into the hills, which can be quite windy and exhausting. But I assure you that the views are worth the trouble. So let's get going. Recently, I made a video about the therapeutic effects of riding in EUC, and you all seem to like it. In it, I talked about the disease of modernity that was poisoning us, and how the EUC could be an antidote. I've linked it in the description if you haven't watched it already. Today, I want to expand on that topic by talking about group rides and what they mean to us. Full disclaimer, I have ridden a total of 3 group rides over the past 3 years, so I'm certainly not an authority on the subject. However, after watching and learning about group rides on EUC and motorcycle channels on YouTube, I realized there was something I could add by drawing on my experience as a doctor. Still, take my words with a grain of salt because, as I said, I'm not an experienced EUC group rider. Here are the 3 questions I aim to answer this time. Number 1. Why do we love traveling in groups? Number 2. What makes an EUC group good or bad? And number 3. How do you know if being in a group is right for you? And after all that, I will reward you with some nice drone footage of Christchurch. So please stick around till the end. Part 1. Why do we love traveling in groups? Humans are perhaps the most successful migratory species on Earth. Although every animal relocates to some extent based on seasons and available resources, humans took that to another level by colonizing some of the most dangerous and inhospitable places on the planet. From the tallest peaks to the deepest trenches, from the wettest rainforests to the driest deserts, and from the scorching tropics to the frigid polar caps, we have explored nearly every corner of our planet. To put it simply, we are naturally talented explorers, and our greatest explorers shared one thing in common. That is, they always traveled in groups. But how did we get here? The answer was first proposed in 2010 by Professor Mark van Voot. I think I might be butchering his name again. In the form of evolutionary leadership theory. This theory states that for our species to survive, we had to solve the problem of social coordination. In other words, the problem of moving in large numbers. This includes relocating entire villages to escape scarcity, organizing group hunts of large animals, or even engaging in conflict with other tribes. Those of us with superior social coordination can organize ourselves into larger and more effective groups, which conferred better odds of survival. whereas those with poorer social coordination splinter into smaller groups that are less resilient to environmental forces, thus reducing their odds of survival. Through natural selection, each successive generation inherits genes that make them natural leaders and followers. It is this symbiotic relationship that allowed us to conquer every corner of the world to become the most dominant species on Earth. When viewed through this lens, our love for group travel was an ancient survival adaptation that evolved out of necessity. Although there is no longer a need to migrate in large groups as our ancestors did, we still possess the genes that enable us to do so. Therefore, we still get a hit of dopamine or a pleasant buzz whenever we solve real-world problems as a group, such as moving in a large EUC group. This theory can also be applied to office workers, sporting teams, army platoons, biker gangs, and many other groups. We naturally organize ourselves into groups with leaders and followers to accomplish a shared goal. Part 2. What makes an EUC group good or bad? To answer this question, I'm going to draw on my experience working in various medical teams over the years. Roughly 15 years ago, I started my first night shift at Christchurch Hospital as a junior doctor. A typical night shift for me would last 7 consecutive nights, although this was later reformed due to burnout and unsafe practice. Our rosters as junior doctors were predetermined 3 months in advance. Therefore, we had a good idea of who we would be teaming up with during our respective night shifts at the start of our rotation. I would breathe a sigh of relief knowing that I have been paired with a friendly, calm, and competent colleague. However, a renowned colleague at the time had a reputation for calling in sick or leaving work prematurely due to mental stress, which often led to chaos amongst us. I braced myself for the worst every time she was on my team, because I expected myself to carry her workload if she didn't pull her weight. The nights often started with a handover meeting, during which doctors of the day shift would pass on vital information regarding their patients to us. Our role as the night watch was to stabilize their patients and handle new patient arrivals until they returned to work the next morning. This handover of information is crucial in setting the pace for the rest of the shift. We would sometimes be informed of an outbreak of norovirus on an elderly ward that requires extra attention, or a staffing shortage that could turn the night into chaos if demand surges, or a particularly unruly patient who should be approached with caution. And at the heart of it all were 2 central coordinators who coordinated our team of a dozen doctors around the hospital. They have a bird's eye view of the hospital and will direct us to where we need to go. So, where am I going with all of this? Well, it wasn't until much later in my career, when I had to lead my own team of doctors as a senior doctor, that I pondered the question of teamwork and leadership. I did not want my team to be dysfunctional, but I had no idea how to lead. And after several failed attempts, I was suddenly reminded of my time as a junior night doctor when everything made sense to me. It was then I discovered a universal recipe for good teamwork that I have implemented ever since in my career. I shall now share that recipe with you by naming the 3 ingredients of good teamwork. The first ingredient is the presence of group members with similar skill levels, or at the very least, complementary skill sets. If a group member is too incompetent, they will destabilize the group by dragging it down or exposing it to unnecessary risks. Likewise, something similar might happen if a group member is overqualified because they might behave unpredictably due to boredom or arrogance. From my experience working at the hospital, teaming up with an incompetent or unreliable colleague is often very stressful. Although none of us is perfect, most of us can sense if someone is either carrying the team or bringing it down. Besides skills, our equipment also matters. Something unique to EUC riding is the range of battery sizes and the wheel options available to riders. If a rider chooses an EUC that doesn't complement the rest of the group, they will become a burden during the group ride. Alternatively, they might be unreliable by showing up to the ride with an empty battery, a flat tire, or without a helmet. The second ingredient is an effective communication system. Conceptually, this involves individual group members taking on technical and leadership positions. While leaders plan and coordinate, technicians detect and solve problems. During my night shift, this role was performed by 2 highly skilled nurse coordinators who could anticipate and solve problems in real time. Practically, this requires a shared communication device such as cell phones, walkie-talkies, hospital pagers, or Bluetooth headsets for EUC riders. At the very least, riders employ universal hand gestures to communicate with each other. From a psychological perspective, every group member must feel safe enough to voice their needs and opinions for general consideration. A new member might need more time to break the ice. At the same time, an obnoxious leader can impede honest communication. The third and final ingredient is the presence of a shared objective. This is often our greatest source of contention as doctors, especially when we're dealing with medical administrators. While doctors prioritize their patients' welfare, administrators prioritize their resources. From a group riding perspective, riders with differing objectives may pose a dilemma for the group as a whole. For example, some members might be more interested in socializing and therefore spend more time talking to each other instead of riding, whereas other riders may be more interested in the ride rather than the social experience and therefore grow impatient while everyone sits around talking. At best, some members might decide to leave the group early, but at worst, this can lead to splintering, making communication and coordination a challenge. When forming an EUC group, one can either be inclusive by opening the invitation to everyone, or be exclusive by being highly selective. While the former usually attracts a larger, more diverse crowd, the latter usually attracts a smaller, highly driven, goal-specific group. It is risky to presume your best friend of 20 years to be a good riding partner for you, because they may behave differently when subjected to stress. Sometimes it may be safer to ride with strangers to avoid emotional attachment. And this explains why some people avoid seeing their colleagues as friends outside of work to avoid a blurring of boundaries. As a rule of thumb, the larger the group, the harder it is to coordinate their movement. The purpose of a group can also be influenced by its size. For example, a group of 3 is intimate and focused, but a group of 30 is casual and scattered. And if you are in a group of 300, well, you might be in Sparta. If my predictions are correct, groups with members of vastly different skill levels and incompatible EUCs are unstable. This can be worsened by ineffective communication or a lack of shared purpose. Therefore, I advise avoiding these groups unless you have a rescue fantasy to fulfill. The recipe for good teamwork is to ensure all 3 magical ingredients are present and to limit your group size to something manageable. Part 3. How do you know if being in a group is right for you? In life, we are not always given a choice to be alone. Sometimes, the decision to belong to a group is made for us, such as at home or at work, and we don't question it. Rather, we make the most of who or what is available to us. However, choosing to ride solo or in an EUC group is a voluntary choice. Sometimes we ride in groups to improve safety and visibility. At other times, we are simply looking for like-minded individuals. Yet, every EUC group demands your vulnerability because that is the principal currency they trade in. Nothing bonds group members together more than their shared successes and failures. From an EUC riding perspective, this could mean traversing long distances through unpredictable weather, qualifying as a team for a race, or tackling a previously unconquered hill. As a doctor, I am all too familiar with this feeling because I have suffered from survivor's guilt. This happened when I was the only one in my study group of 5 to have passed my medical exams despite having studied together for many years. Although being part of that group gave me a sense of camaraderie, the feeling of survivor's guilt is equally, if not more, devastating. Over the years and many professional exams later, I have grown weary of joining groups because I do not wish to feel vulnerable. I am also insecure with my writing skills, and it would devastate me to burden my group. Furthermore, my introverted nature ensures that my social battery, unlike my Master Pro battery, is entirely depleted by the end of the week. The last thing I need is to mingle with more people, which will only drain me further. I also like to point out the myth of finding the perfect group. In fact, all groups are flawed and slightly dysfunctional. But that is what makes them so charming, as long as you are looking in from the outside. The perfect group for you is not found, it is forged. That is, you must allow the group to change you as much as you change the group. With time, patience, and luck, you might end up with something uniquely suited to your quirky personality. But come on, how many of us have such time and patience? Am I right? So in summary, I'd say a casual EUC group is hard to say no to if you are an extrovert, but a serious EUC group is hard to get into if you are jaded like me. Besides, I don't feel the need to join any group because I live vicariously through all the YouTube EUC content creators. Seeing group rides on YouTube already makes me feel like I'm part of it. How convenient! And here we have arrived at the top of the hill. The weather today is perfect for drone filming because it is sunny and not too windy. However, it would have been better if I'd arrived sooner to beat the traffic, but this is just as good. As you can see, this is a popular spot for cyclists and joggers, with the occasional car that passes through. You are now looking at Christchurch New Brighton Beach, which faces the South Pacific Ocean.
I'm on the top of the world, looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find is the love that I've found ever since you've been around. Your love's put me at the top of the world. Something in the wind has learned my name.
Thank you for sticking with me till the end. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Please share your thoughts and experiences with group rides in the comments so I can learn more about the topic. And as always, ride safe out there, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!
This day is through, I hope that I will find that tomorrow will be just the same.